Hey everyone, and welcome to the Supernatural Substation, your last stop before the unknown. I'm your host, Eileen Pastanio, and my co host, Bernadine Richardson, will be joining me soon with tonight's guest, Cheyanne Disa. Cheyanne is a full time New Orleans psychic, evidential medium, teacher, spiritualist, and ceremonialist with over 35 years of study and experience. She discovered her metaphysical gifts early in life and developed them with the guidance of her mother as a teenager living in California during the 1980s. A prolific encounter around 2003 prioritized Cheyenne's focus on studies in parapsychology and inspired the devotional practices which she has used to help others. For several years, Cheyenne led paranormal tours and investigations in and around Seattle's Pike Place Market, and this included the production of her own public access paranormal show, Ill Famed Spirits. Cheyenne has spent years hosting and touring the U.S. with ongoing events and workshops, including dozens of haunting art installations. She's a resource to the community on the subjects of death and mourning, as well as ceremonial and ritual hygiene and spiritual cleansings. So, Cheyenne will be talking about all of this and more when the Supernatural Substation returns right after this quick break.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Supernatural Substation. I am joined by my host extraordinaire, co-host extraordinaire, Bernadine Richardson. Hey, Dean.
Hey, everybody. Hope you're ready for the holidays.
Ooh-wee. Yep. We are 8 days out from Thanksgiving. Can you
And I
believe
still don't know how to cook a turkey.
it? Anybody who's been following us, like either years ago or recently on this channel, we've gone through the turkey thing where Dean has cooked the entire bag of giblets and necks and whatever else they put in that bag in the turkey. Didn't you do that? And you didn't
I
defrost it or
sure
something?
did.
I thought that
My
only.
cousin said, "Did you take the bag out?" I'm like, "What bag?" The guts inside. I'm like, "What guts?" It was like, "Stick your hand in there and pull it out." And I stick my hand, it's frozen. I'm
Cooked.
like, "They got something in there, but it's frozen." He's like, "Well, get it out of there." I said, "Well, the legs got a plastic thing on it." He's like, "Well, cut it off." So I'm like, "Well, what the heck?" So I get this big hacksaw looking knife and I'm digging into the poor turkey. Yeah, it was a disaster. So hopefully I'm doing better this year.
Look, you need to get a Butterball, and they have a hotline. It's a 1-800 number. You can just call them, and they can walk you through it and all that. I
Put up
almost
a
did.
YouTuber.
I was so distracted, like last year, I almost did that. I almost left the thing because all I do with that is cook it, for the dogs, as a treat because I don't make any gravy out of it or anything. So but yeah, we're entering that zone. People are going to start catching their houses on fire with frying turkeys and who knows what else. So, but I've got to do it, and I've been a little under the weather. I still sound like that. My apologies to the audience, but I'm still getting over. I've been sick for like a month with crud. So glad to be getting over it and getting to the holidays, and we're getting some cool weather too coming in this week. Tonight,
Yes, it feels great.
like tonight.
Mhm.
Well, and then they don't know if it's going to be cold for Thanksgiving though. So we'll see. I hate living down here this time of year. I just wish we had 4 seasons like everything else. But or everyone else. It seems like everyone. They're always posting their whatever videos on YouTube. Oh, it's snowing. No, the leaves are falling. I'm like, it's 91. It feels like July, but there's brown leaves now. So but anyway, enough of that. Enough of checking in on that. So we do have a guest with us. We have a New Orleans local guest. Her name is Cheyanne Disa. and we're going to bring her in now. Welcome, Cheyanne.
Hi, I'm so
Nice.
excited to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I understand that you and Dean met. Where was it, Dean? At the Axeman
The
thing,
haunted hotel.
a haunted
Yes,
hotel
there.
Axeman thing. So, and you have you sent me a fascinating bio with a lot of stuff, and so I wanted you to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, what's going on with you, and just whatever you want to talk about. But introduce yourself to the audience.
Alrighty, so I'm Cheyanne Disa, and I'm a psychic evidential medium here in New Orleans. I'm also an artist, and I do performance, and I do go by also Cirrus Mugga Rose. So you may see either or names if you Google me. And those are both me, yes. Yeah, I'm a full-time evidential medium here in New Orleans, and I do events also with like tarot. I do herbal oracle readings. I'm working on collections of puppets right now, which are spiritual dolls. And I just completed a collection called the Holy Hags that I worked on all summer. And then I did a seance installation with them in October, which I'll be doing another one in December.
Mm.
Um, and so what does that mean, right?
Right, the holy hags. Well,
Yeah. So the holy hags are these. I've been making dolls for over 20 years now. So I do a lot of like high-end art dolls. I do spiritual dolls. I also will lead workshops where you create puppets, and it could be for ancestor work or personal journeys that you're on. But this collection that I've been working on is called the Holy Hags. And so it's bringing in that like grandmother energy and honoring the feminine, the aging feminine that so many people can be fearful of, but really that's who holds us, and we wouldn't be here without them.
mm-hmm.
And so this collection I created, there's 33 of them. And what I did for the installation, which I called the seance installation, is the Holy Hag picks you. Like, you don't go in like a normal art show where you're like, I want that piece. She's going to pick you. And what that entails is some divination. And I have them all placed in boxes around a table, like they're all sitting there, but in their boxes with a major arcana card on top of it from the tarot. And so we do a divination one-on-one, and what card you receive is the holy hag that you receive, and you can use her as like a talisman, a healing tool, as an altar piece. And so that is something that I've been really passionate about and working on and loving to offer to others. And um, that took up most of my summer. Besides the haunted hotel and doing my day job as a medium, I spent the summer doing that. So
Are you at a particular location in New Orleans? Is that
I
where you do readings?
yes, I'm downtown on O'Keefe in the New Orleans Exchange Building. I'm colleagues with Carrie Roy.
Oh, okay.
Been
Mm-hmm.
been working with her for about 5 years at that location. We have offices on the 10th floor. So
Okay. Okay. All
yeah.
right. Yeah, because we had her on. Now I know exactly where you are because she was telling us about it. Well, let me back up a little bit because you were once a little girl.
Yeah.
And were you born in New Orleans, or are you from somewhere else? And when did you begin to understand that you had these gifts, these
Yeah.
abilities? So tell us about your start.
Alrighty. So I actually grew up in the Bay Area by San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a teenager in the 80s going through teenage stuff. And my mother basically one day was like, it's time for you to start learning what this gift is. And so we went to a lot of like weekend classes, metaphysical fairs, psychic fairs, things like that. My mother was also a reader. She did tarot. And that's really when my journey began, when I started studying a lot of like esoteric, occult, the all the unseen things that you get curious about as a normal teenager also. And by 16, I was starting to kind of I was giving past life readings. That was what I was really called to do in the beginning. But I also was only 16. And so within about 2 years, I realized I'm not ready for this because people would get emotional. And, I just didn't have the life experience to offer readings in that way, I felt. So kind of put it on the side burner. And I would always have very prolific dreams. Like if somebody passed away, they would come visit me in my dreams. I would let them know they passed, or things would come true from my dream state, or I was always very just intuitive. And so I couldn't ignore it anymore. It happened through my 20s. I would acknowledge it, but I didn't really dive into it. I'd just been gotten busy, like um, going to college, I was in a band, I started a family. But on my 30th birthday, I could no longer ignore it because a close friend of mine passed away, Tom. And he visited me in my dreams. I let him know he passed. And he relayed to me to ask Nicole, his girlfriend at the time, to keep the baby. And I thought that was kind of crazy. I was like, I'm not doing that.
Mm.
So after a couple nights of having this consistent dream with him, I, as I knew the way that I was raised, it's like, okay, maybe I should pay attention to this because this is 3 nights in a row.
Mhm.
So I went and I found Nicole through our mutual friends, and I kind of pulled her outside, and I'm like, I don't know if you're going to think I'm crazy, but I've been having these dreams with Tom. And she was so thrilled. She was like, oh, I've been waiting for something like that. And I said, he has a message. He told me to let you know to keep the baby. Well, she completely she started crying. She couldn't believe I was telling her this because a few days before he passed unexpectedly, she had found out she was pregnant, but they hadn't told anybody.
Mm.
And so there was like no way I would know because she still hadn't told anybody because he passed, and then she didn't know what she was going to do, right? 'Cause she's like,
Right.
do I keep it? Do I not? Like, people are going to judge me if I do or if I don't. So she kept the baby, and now I'm like, the baby's, this is 20 years later. So here we are. And it was really from that time on that like I took it seriously, and I
Mhm.
realized what a blessing and a gift this is. And so I just really dove into like weekend retreats, read everything I could. I did some initiations as a devotee of Hecate, and just all that kind of stuff until it developed into where I am now. The last 10 years I've been offering these services, and putting like mediumship on your resume is, I feel, not just
Mhm.
something that's a blessing. It's not just like, oh, whatever. Like, it took me many years and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of readings to get the confidence to put that on there, because it's not something that you just like I said, just, oh yeah, I'm a medium. It's a big responsibility, and I feel it's a very it's an interesting career, which I would have never dreamt in a million years this would be my career. And I feel blessed with it every day. Like I always say, I'm in awe of the messages that come through, and when I'm
Mhm.
not in awe, I will retire. It's it's exciting to me. I feel really sacred with it. I feel very blessed with it to be able to help folks that are either in grief, or sometimes they're at a crossroads, and that's more of a psychic reading, of course. But
Mhm.
to be able to hold space for people in that way feels um very very affirming of many things, but also just brings me joy. Like
Mhm.
I'll sometimes leave sessions and I'm teary because I'm happy. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. And I want to always feel that way about it. I don't want to ever be jaded or feel disgruntled. I don't feel like you could hold space in that way and feel that way. So the joy that I get from it is just really charges me. It's like electric.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you were a little kid, well, first of all, I wanted to say around 30 years old, you said you took the dive and accepted it and went in. And that's interesting because that's according to astrology, and I'm not an astrologer. I can't do math, so I never learned it. But I do know that that's your first Saturn return is at 30, wherever it was
Yeah.
in your chart, in your natal chart. it returns. So that's always a life, a life changer. It can be. And Saturn forcing you to look at what you're doing and what you've accomplished and want to do. But when you were a little kid, before you really really knew anything about this, did you experience what would be called ghosts, hauntings? Did people come to you then, like randomly? Did
Yes.
you have those kind of experiences?
And that's what had been going on for most of my childhood.
Uh-huh.
That's why around 14, my mom was like, it was just funny. I'll never forget that day. We were in the car. I was in 8th grade. She was picking me up from school, and I had
Mhm.
some experiences that were really intense. And she just looked at me and said, "It's time for your training." And I'm like, this is like out of a movie when I look back on it.
What?
So yeah, but she said, even when I was 2 and 3 years old, I would tell her these stories, and I would always say, well, that's before I came down here and you're my mom.
Ah.
And so my mom was, of course, like, it was the 70s, so she was very quote unquote witchy and open and very, like, she was a reader. So she very much, like, I would say, like, I don't know if it embraced it, but like didn't push it away, didn't squash it, right? And then I
Right.
was also, she's Slavic, our family's Slavic women. So even though they were Christian, they were very like open to spirit. And
Mhm.
so like her grandfather, my great grandfather founded the first Hungarian church in Manhattan that is still active. So we come from a long line of people that are spiritual in different ways, but very spiritual. So it
Wow.
was always open. It was never squashed, right? And so,
Mhm.
I grew up in a house that was definitely active. It was bizarrely active. And like we would come home and the kitchen table would be set, things like that, which was really
Wait,
bizarre because,
where do we get that? Is there
right?
one that,
I'm like, come
let's see, is
on.
there one that cleans? Can I get that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would just be bizarre things like that. I grew up in San Martin, California, which is about 40 minutes, 50 minutes from San Francisco south.
Mhm.
And we lived in this little tiny house next to the railroad tracks. And my stepfather at the time had grown up about 5 blocks away, so he lived on the street for like 40 years or something crazy.
Mm. Mm.
And had experiences up the street. And our house, I mean, I can have a whole episode of telling you all the experiences I had growing up in that house and my mom experienced, and it was unbelievable. And
Mhm.
we found out after we moved out of there when I was 12, and within a few years there was even, this sounds so like made up, there was an article in the local newspaper that there had been graves in a cemetery where the houses were built.
Ah.
And
Oh.
so,
Wow.
it was I still have dreams about that house. It's still there. And so we had experiences growing up there. And then, like I said, I've always, since I could remember, I've always loved like haunted movies, haunted shows, Night Gallery, Twilight Zone,
Mhm.
that's always been something that is just since I can remember. I mean, I can't
Mhm.
even think of when I didn't have interest in any of that or have experiences or have uncanny things come true that I had talked about as a kid happen. And so but like I said, when I could really pinpoint it was at 14 when my mom, I'll just never forget, she looked at me and was like, it's time for your training. So we were doing a lot of like dream analysis classes, past life classes. I learned how to ground at that age, which I feel like is such a blessing because the grounding I do to this day, and I'm 51.
Mhm.
So I've developed like added little ingredients to the grounding that I do with groups and one-on-ones, but the grounding really helped me through a lot of my turmoil years of being a radical teenager and 20-year-old. So um,
Well, that's
yeah,
cool. That's something I could have used. But
yeah,
backing up a little bit, when you said hag dolls, the first thing in the back of my mind that popped up was Night Gallery and the doll episode. That doll,
yes,
that
yep,
got that doll. I mean, and recently there's a content creator on YouTube called Blind Dweller, and he does art and he does weird art and stuff. Like he did like a whole thing on Marina Abramovich and all. But he did this Night Gallery one, and the doll is in the thumbnail, and I'm like, I'm scrolling through YouTube, and like, oh
right.
my god, it's that doll. doll, everybody remembers it. It's like, look at,
Of
he even
course.
says, look at this MFing doll. And it's like, yeah, it's sitting on the stage. I remember, and I remembered that episode. There's the first ever one that premiered on Night Gallery, but that episode right there stayed with me. And I'm not really afraid of dolls now, but I will admit that I really didn't like playing with dolls,
I
when I was
didn't
little
either.
and young.
You know
Yeah,
what's
I
funny
mean,
is I did not either, and then I
mhm.
became a doll maker. Like, I've been a professional doll maker for, like, over 20 years, but as a child, I did not play with dolls. I had horses and stuff.
Oh,
So, like,
yeah.
I was more of that girl and reading books. I was always reading. Um, and I will say this really intense experience that happened to me in that house was when I was around 7 years old, because my mom was starting to freak out because she could hear me talking to obviously nobody as an only child in my room. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would walk and I would put the TV on, and it's the 70s. So, like, there was like 3 channels, right?
Right. and
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 she
a
would
yeah, and a public access. There was like three, and then those
right,
weird ones. Yeah.
right, until midnight, and then there was no TV, right? But
Hmm.
there was a few nights that happened over like a couple seasons that, like, she would hear me up and I would be sitting in front of the TV, but it would be like the snowy channel. And
Mm.
but I would have my eyes closed. It was like I was sleepwalking or something, but I would be talking to somebody. So she was really starting to feel uneasy about it. So there was a Baptist church down the street from us. So she went and talked to them and said, "What can I do? This is, my little girl." And they were like, "Spirits love little girls or kids."
Hmm.
So kids aren't scared of them. So they basically gave my mother a bunch of like holy cloths that they blessed with oil, and everything. And so she waited one night until I went to sleep. And I had this really old fashioned bed with a big like headboard and footboard. So she tied all of the holy cloths basically all over my bed in knots, 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 where you'd have to cut them off with scissors.
Hmm.
And she got up in the morning before me to check in, and all of them had been untied and were laying on the floor around my bed.
Oh, wow.
So there was stuff like that going on. So I said I could have a whole episode about it. But
Yeah.
it was really intense, and my mom was pretty freaked out at that point because hello. So, but
Yeah.
we still lived there till I was like 12, but it was really active. And all of my friends that I grew up with around that neighborhood would have stories too, which is rare that you have, like, unless you live in New Orleans. But
Yeah. Yeah.
like, where it's like
Right.
a lot of your friends in elementary school are having these experiences at their houses. Some of us didn't even talk about it until we were in middle school because we were a little older and we were tired when we were younger.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry, my phone's ringing. Let me just.
There.
And so
Okay.
that's some of sorry, that's some of the experiences that were very intense growing up, and that you know um I think formed a lot of who I am also
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
um
Well, it's
my mom taught.
interesting too that, well, not only was it turned out to be a graveyard, but one day Dean will have to do a show talking about houses that are by railroad tracks. I don't know what it is about railroad tracks, but at railroad tracks and trailer homes, mobile homes, houses
Right.
near that. I don't know what it is. If it's the iron, or in the case of the mobile home, I really don't know. But some of the worst hauntings I've ever heard about from anybody occurred in like mobile homes in the middle of woods, where
Right.
there shouldn't have been anything. But that's getting a little off track. We should do it. We should have you back to talk about the house and then talk about that then.
I would
But
love
did
to, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, did you know San Francisco is, or was at one time, the sister city of New Orleans? Like back in the 1800s, she was called the Sister of New Orleans, and they both have that bohemian vibe, that continent. In New Orleans, it's that continental European feel,
Right.
and the flavor in San Francisco was more like that exploration of Asia that was so popular then and everything. So eventually, then you made your way down here. So what was that trip like? Like, did you go? You left San Francisco, and did you travel around before you settled in New Orleans?
Oh yeah. And so 1998 was my first visit to New Orleans. My close friends in 7th grade moved here in around 93 when we were like 18, 19,
Mm.
and had been telling me, you got to come here, you got to come here, you'll love it, you'll love it. And so I finally made it in 1998, and it's a big blur because I was like, gosh, what was I, 24, 25? So I partied like you do when you're 24, 25 and you come somewhere, went to all the Anne Rice stops because I'd read all her books in like high school. But I was like, I am in love with it, but I'm also a new mom. I had my oldest daughter the year before, and I was
Mm.
like, there's no way I could live here because I am just too radical and out of control and like to have fun. So, I was like, I was just trying to be a responsible, good mommy. But I
Mhm.
loved it. It was like when I really got a peek into it, I got to meet Ernie Cato. He made me a drink at the mother-in-law. I had some really cool experiences while I was here.
Mm.
And I didn't return until 2009.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
and so in that meantime, in that window, me and my family, me and my husband had moved the kids and our whole family to Seattle.
Mhm.
And so that's where I wanted the kids to grow up. So we moved around 2006, and we lived there until 2019. And in the meantime, I got divorced and all that and had a new relationship. And my oldest daughter, was in her 20s, and my youngest was 15. And we were finally able to move here. But from 2009 to 2019, I visited here 22 times. I was here a lot.
You did come
Um,
here a lot.
yeah,
Well,
any of the kids' vacations, we came for Mardi Gras. I normally came and did an art installation in October for Art for Art's sake.
mm.
Um, I was kind of, I feel, seeding where I was going to be. And then when it started to harvest, I was able to move here and move all of my work here and just kind of settle in and have friends that are family that are here, and a big community. So,
So when you were in Seattle, you were doing the tours. Um,
yeah.
you were one of the first to do some of the haunted and paranormal tours. Now, I know Seattle has that huge Shanghai area and everything like that. So what were those like? What did you
Well,
do?
that's in Portland. That's in
Oh, that's
Portland.
Portland. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like about 3 hours away. So
Sorry.
yeah, I worked for Mercedes. Her name was Mercedes, and she wrote the whole haunted tour in Pike Place Market.
Mhm.
And so I did that from 2010 to 2015, which was incredible experience. Prior to that, I had a public access paranormal show called Ill Famed Spirits,
Mm.
and I feel like when I moved to Seattle, my like my esoteric life really got activated where I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing, right?
Right.
And so I hosted different shows around death and like Victorian mourning rituals. Like this was all like in 2006, 7, 8. Had this public access show for a couple years. And then I took the job at Pike Place Market and I was there for about 5 years. I loved being a paranormal tour guide, and we would go. I was really, for most of the time there, the only tour guide. There was only 5 of us or so at most of the time, but I was the only one most of the time, 90% of the time, that would take the groups into Pell's Mortuary, which is
Mm.
one of the most haunted locations in the country, right?
Right. I think
And I
I saw that on Ghost Adventures, I think.
Yep. Yeah, Mercedes is on there. The lady that wrote the tour, she's amazing. She lives in
Okay.
Spain now, I think, but she grew up in the market. Um, and so I did that for many, many years. That was like my world besides my bands and stuff, but like that was my day job, right? Was being the tour guide. And so I did anywhere from like about half a dozen to a dozen tours a week. And some days I was taking 2 to 3 groups into the mortuary, which is this 4-level building that on the bottom is Kel's Irish Pub, and they own all of the upper floors, but the upper floors just cannot keep a business, and so they stopped leasing it out to restaurants around 2006 or 7 because it was just ridiculous, or maybe it was 2008. Um, and so I would take small groups in there up to 12 people to have a paranormal experience. So there was no electricity or anything in the building on the top 3 floors. And so we would sit in a circle and I would tell them a story and the history of the mortuary because it was one of the first viewing mortuaries in the country. And it was basically like the Walmart of the dead. So like you could get the caskets were made there. They even had lodging for the families that were going to, be there for the service or memorials.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, as you know, like most of that all happened as a wake in the living room of your home, right? So
Right.
this was one of the first places in the country that really marketed themselves, the Butterworth family. But also who was involved there eventually was Linda Hazard, which is a well-known serial killer that starved her victims to death. Like they paid her to do this
Mm-hmm.
fasting. She'd written a book.
I remember
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and so she would like starve these folks to death, which most of them were wealthy people, and it was kind of like a spa retreat where it's like, oh, you're gonna fast so that you clear out your body so you feel better. But she would starve them to death, and then she would keep their money or have them write all her money to them because they'd be malnutritioned.
Right.
It's called oh my gosh, starving. How weird! I can't think of the name of the book right now. But
Well,
anyways, Linda
I
Hazard.
saw that episode that on an episode of Dead Files. They
Yes,
went
and
and they did that, and Steve DeChavo showed, told all the history of it because they
yeah,
were
yeah,
up, like
starvation
she was
heights.
up in the woods, and that this doctor was nuts. I mean, she was
Yeah,
because she, according to him, she really thought she was doing something. I mean, she was a complete
mhm,
narcissist, was taking the
right.
money and killing them, but in her mind, she was helping these people. So
Right.
so the dead were brought to Kells. Is that what you're
They
saying?
were
That they
brought to the
handled
Butterworths. Yeah, to Butterworths, which is where Kells is
Butterworths.
located now,
Mhm.
yeah, and getting the bodies cremated so the families would come back into town and be like, "What happened?" This was a healthy person that went in, like, a month ago,
Right.
and she would get them cremated before the bodies could be seen because the bodies were just starved,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so what happened is when she got caught was these 2 wealthy sisters, basically kind of like the Paris Hiltons of the time, came in to do her retreat, and one of them died, and the family was, like, so curious of, like, what's going on with them. They were from England. The family came over, and one of the sisters was still living, and she was, like, 72 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And
Some
so
god
this is
awful.
when
Hmm.
yeah, so, Starvation Heights is the book, and, it's a really interesting. So anyway, so that was my world for about 4 or 5 years,
Hmm.
and, then I was in the mortuary one day, and the spirits told me, "Your work is done here." Like, literally, they were like, you need to move on to, like, what you're doing next," and that's really when a lot of my mediumship got very activated on a level where I was starting to offer it to others as, as a service, as readings, and things like that.
Hmm. Did you continue tour guide or haunted history tours or anything like that when you came here?
No, because I was already in full swing of, like,
Ah, okay.
readings, and
Hmm.
so yeah, the last, 5 years I was in Seattle. I worked out of an apothecary. I had, like, my own room, and that's where I would do all of my sessions, and I led classes and things like that. So that's what I was doing the last 5 years I was there.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
so when you came to New Orleans, it probably got tuned up a lot more. because
Yeah,
it's
in a bigger way.
such a psychic and supernatural hotbed and everything. So how did that start out for you? How did I know you said you work with or you met and now work with a Carrie Roy, but did you find that your senses and everything were like more like totally acute once you got down here?
I think they definitely matured more,
Hmm.
but also, the Cascadia, the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, like, is very, very active, is very,
Hmm.
very much so, but in a different way.
Right.
Um, they didn't get it, I'm like they because it's like not me anymore because I'm like, thank God. But I love Cascadia, but it's like overcast 9 months of the year.
I'm moving
And so
there. That's it.
there's like a darkness that comes in with that.
Yeah.
You have to get special lighting in your house because you'll get depressed. You have to take vitamins. There's a lot of creativity because of it. It's just like in, England, like there's a lot of creative things that happen because people are forced indoors, and it's this gloomy, dreary, place, except for the summers are perfect there. But
Mm.
um I definitely feel like it was like a graduation coming here. Like I graduated college and now I'm getting my PhD. I'm in New Orleans, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I've known Carrie, we were friends probably about almost 10 years before we became colleagues or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I moved here, I already had like, I have probably a couple hundred people that I either give readings off of, or we do a few a year. I have people that I monthly mentor. And then when I moved here, my quote unquote brother, I just call him my brother. We've been friends for 30 years. He owned a gallery on Royal Street where my dolls were at and such. And so he created a little space in the back of the gallery where I could see clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that the first, up until COVID hit,
Wow.
and when COVID hit, of course, went directly remote. And so Carrie was giving me her overflow because she's booked out for months. And
Yeah.
she's like, it's a shame to like, just, tell people, nope, I can't see you, or what, can't help you. I'm booked out for 3 months or whatever. So she offered me to give her like the overflow basically of clientele. So I started doing that as soon as I moved here.
That,
And so that's who I would see Luigi in person. Was a lot of her overflow because it's like appointment only, and it was in the back of the gallery. And then we did months and months of remote work through in the beginning of COVID. And then, yeah, she called me in one day. She's like, I haven't had any complaints about you. And that's rare. You're really good at what you do. So why don't you come join me up here in the New Orleans Exchange building, and, get you an office. And I share an office with a couple other people now. There's been a couple other people added to the team. But yeah, I've been there since, I've been there, I think, I want to say 3 years, full time, 4 days a week, basically. So
okay.
full time is a
Well,
medium. Like, I don't want to work 8 to 10 hours a day. Like I basically am there 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. and that's where I
that's
stand.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, the work that you're doing is definitely, I mean, taxing physically
Yeah.
as well as spiritually. So yeah, and who wants to be chained to a 8 to 5 doing anything? I can't, I can't
Yeah.
imagine that anymore. But so did you have some weird experiences? Like where were you living when you moved down here? And you did, everywhere is haunted.
Right.
But tell us a little bit about if you've had any encounters or anything down here that kind of struck you that you want to tell us about.
Huh. Let's see. Well, I've lived in the same house since I moved here. I live in the Seventh Ward. My house was built in like the 1880s. Um, and actually, my youngest child when we moved here was 15 and was having a lot of experiences in the middle of the night.
Mm.
There was like a man that would come and just kind of like stare at her face.
No, yeah.
Oh,
And yeah, and one time she like went to hit him because you wake up startled, and like knocked
Hmm.
her laptop over and everything.
Mm.
Uh, we've seen chairs move in our kitchen, like physically move. Um, can be startling. I basically have a container in my house though, because I am a practitioner also. So I'm not just like, like some people are just do tarot, some do psychic, some do this or that. I have like, I'm a psychic, I am a medium, I'm also a practitioner, I am an initiated priestess of Hecate. So I'm constantly like feeding my altars, my ancestors, asking for that kind of protection. I'm really passionate about spiritual hygiene and routines as rituals. So um, mostly the house is pretty mellow,
Hmm.
but there's been a few times, like I said, where some weird things will happen, but I think that's just normal. It doesn't freak me out. Um, what freaked me out was like a month ago, me and my husband were going to leave, and he saw somebody dressed all in white in my passenger seat. And there's no
Oh.
one there. My seats are black.
oh God.
That kind of freaked me out. I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "There was
Mhm.
someone sitting in the passenger seat all in white." And I'm like, "Really?" Um, and
No.
I'm pretty good about like, I turn off my tuner when I'm not in session. Like, I'm not a medium that walks around and I'm like, oh, there's this or that. I am also like, I have what I've created is called the spirit wreaths. And so all of us have like about 6 sets of spirit wreaths around us, which is like, we're in the center, and then next to us is our guides, and then so on and so forth. There's like the ancestors, there's the gatekeepers, there's the body tenders, and then whoever you're a devotee of, if it's Jesus, if it's Buddha, if it's whoever, right? So I have a pretty good relationship with my spirit team. That's what my altar work is about and everything. So I set boundaries with the dead. I'm very, very firm with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I've had some experiences at my house.
Yeah, that
I've had some
counts.
experiences like the car was scary, right?
Well, yeah, because usually somebody in all white sitting in your car is not really
right.
good.
And
Maybe he was just trying to get your attention, but I wouldn't be happy to see that. I would stay home that day.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm trying to think of something like prominently that sticks out to me, because I think that also, since I'm constantly working with the dead, channeling with the dead, like there's not a lot of things that totally throw me off, but that person all in white in my passenger seat, that threw me off.
I guess it did.
Well, I have
Yeah.
a question, Cheyenne.
Yes.
Do you feel like something maybe in a past life may have drawn you to New Orleans?
Oh, yes, 100%. I get a little emotional about it. I have this I call them downloads when I get downloads from the guides or the spirits. And I had this download, I call it, where I call New Orleans she, like mother, right? Like she's this entity, she's this thing, right? Because once you get the fever of New Orleans, like you can't get rid of it. It's really hard to. You either love her or you hate it, or you make it here or you don't, And I have this theory that a lot of us will be born elsewhere, and she sees if we come home, because once you get here and you have that feeling, like it makes me feel emotional, where it's like when you love New Orleans, you freaking love New Orleans. You don't just kind of like it, or
Yeah.
it's the only city I've lived in where the residents collect um things of the city. Do you know what I mean? Like, I lived in Seattle. I didn't have a lot of friends that were collecting the Space Needle. You
Yeah.
know, it's like it's very passionate here, and I'm not even a football fan, but my bank card here has the Saints logo because I'm like, yes, you know. And I've lived in other cities. Like, I didn't have a 49ers card. I would never have a 49ers card, but it's like with New Orleans, there's this passion there, and I feel like that passion comes if you weren't born here. It's from past lives, and um in my genealogy work that I've studied, my family came here actually from Cork, Ireland in 1782. They didn't stay long, but I always feel like there's that connection too, of thinking about coming over from there and this being this new world for you, in
They
1782.
came here to America or here to New Orleans?
New Orleans, yeah, New
Okay.
Orleans.
Yeah. Oh
But
yeah,
yes,
the Irish
yeah, I
and
didn't want to be here then.
the Sicilian. Well, there's the Irish. I mean, I'm New Orleans born and bred, and there are a lot of dead Irish all over New Orleans. Let's just put it that way. They
No, I
built,
know that. Yeah,
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 they dug out the New Basin Canal, and
yeah.
where they died, they left them,
I know. It's
and
awful.
there's over, I mean, there's in the thousands, the possibility, because they had cholera, yellow fever. They lived where they worked, and they were digging up all that muck and everything, only to
Yeah.
later, decades later, they came in and they closed the whole thing in, and created Pontchartrain Expressway. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're feeling. I mean, I'm looking around. I've got stuff from the city. It's even more important now because the city's changed so much, and I've written about it. And she is a mother, and she's an adoptive mother too. But it's like I've always said, she makes that final decision. Sometimes some people
Yeah.
she'll chase right out of here.
Yeah,
Like
and
they
I've
want to be
witnessed that
here,
with
but she
people.
chases them. Yeah, she don't want
Yeah.
them.
Or
Mm-hmm.
people come here and then all of a sudden they're an alcoholic, or they come here and they're all of a sudden can't keep a job, or like,
Well,
and
that's so much spirit, so many spirit attachments.
yeah,
Which I mean, we've talked about Katrina in the past, but after Katrina, it was terrible for the city. It's really never recovered, because you're talking about your altars and everything, and when they finally evacuated the city, and even Sally Ann Glassman, which I'm going to get to. I know you're at the healing center too. She has her own stories. All those, and there are, people think, well, there's an altar here and there's an altar there, but there are so many people who have all these altars in their homes, and they all had to evacuate, and so a lot of, I mean, the spirits just went unfed. They didn't have any tending. They didn't have any offerings. They didn't have anything to eat, and so as soon as these are the spirits that attached to people like you're talking about, alcoholism, sex addiction, gambling, everything on Bourbon Street, everything that is available. So there was really just this black pall, this shadow, this really palpable black dark shadow that fell over New Orleans, and it was full of negativity because there were so many hungry spirits. Even it was very unique, and I don't really think it's ever gotten its balance back. People say it has, but it hasn't, because what happened was a lot of people from elsewhere with not the best intentions flowed into the city, sort of like a carpetbagger type thing. When they came in, bought up all the houses, and now they're selling houses where I grew up, down by Broad Street, for $385,000 for these, really old shotgun houses, and you can't touch it.
oh,
Five
it's
hundred thousand
wild.
dollars in the middle of a high crime area. It's and they're pricing New Orleanians out of, so they have to live somewhere else. They priced out of their city.
Yeah, it's hard.
And not only that, I mean, the crime too, but I've always said she makes the decision. New Orleans decides whether you can stay here. And I've seen people have to pack up and just, just go because they can't make a life here. And that's
Yeah.
just, how it is. Now I was going to ask you a question about, your devotion to Hecate. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did that come about? Did you choose her? Did she choose you? And what do you do with that?
Yeah. I became a devotee of her like in 2010. There was um just a couple occurrences where she kept popping up like random, like literally found a wrapped up scarf with like a statue of her and some devotional tools at a place that I was putting on an event that was like
Mm.
underneath like a deck. Like we're just like, what the heck? Um, and then she just kept coming into my path, or I started noticing her because once you become a devotee, it's like you start realizing she's been with you for so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with she's really who helps me in my mediumship. I feel like I don't put that on my ancestors and all my guides. I mean, my guides help me and they help protect me, but I definitely feel like she very much activated a lot of my death work that I do, my necromancy work. The people get scared when you hear the word necromancy, but if you're working with ancestors, that's necromancy. You're working with the dead,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
So, so she's definitely, I feel, what really tuned me in. Like I think of like when you're doing readings, be it psychic, medium, Reiki, whatever, you're tuning into like a radio station, right? And so
Right.
like I feel like she just tuned me right on in and made it clear to me that this was my path. There was no avoiding it.
Mm-hmm.
Um and I remember when my friend said, "Oh my God, you are such a Hecatean. Like you are the protector of outcasts," and because that's one of her roles.
Right.
And with her, I feel like all the deities will get like I don't want to say pigeonholed, but like she is the queen of the crossroads. She's the queen of the night, all of that. But her epithets are so many more things, like the light bringer, the protector of mother and children, and she's just this incredible force that
Mm-hmm.
I fall in love with her more and more over the years. And when I kind of call it renewing my vows with her. There'll be other things that surface about her that I'm just like, gosh, I love her. Um, and she is the filth eater, she is the sin eater, she is all these things. And that's what I love about her, because none of us are just one thing. Like, I'm not
Right.
just a mom, or I'm not just a doll maker, I'm not just a psychic or a medium. Like, all of us have so many things that we are, and she reminds us of that, I feel, or for me, she does.
Yeah,
And so
she gets a bad rap because of her association, obviously, with witchcraft and mother of witches and all that. And the epithet I like is devourer of light. That was
yes,
always my favorite. It's like, yeah, I like the dark. I
yes,
asked because she is very interesting, and there is sort of this undercurrent of people who follow her and worship her down here. Down in Holt Cemetery, the
mhm,
paupers feel well. It's been rehabilitated by Save Our Cemeteries, which is a good thing but a bad thing because it took a lot of the character. But it's the Voodoo Cemetery. I'm sure you know about it. There
I do.
was,
I
yeah,
have a
there
photo
was.
shoot I do.
Yeah, right. There was, if you continue, like you go in and you go straight, it teed off into a triple crossroads, and there was this huge oak stump there. It was an old dead oak tree that had been cut down, but it was hollow. And at that crossroads, I used to went on when we go to Holt Cemetery, and Dean's been with me, and I've been there on other occasions, but there were always offerings to her in that tree stump there. And I think it's gone now. I think they've torn it up and they've just done, they think they've improved it. They have. I mean, for the sake of the people that are buried there, they have done the improvements and stuff, and they keep up with stuff. But the things that made it magical. And there was another time, and I'll just tell you this, just gives an interesting story real quick. I knew someone who also was a devotee of Hecate, and he kept an altar to her in his backyard. And no, I wasn't at the time, but I mean, I knew all about her and everything, and I couldn't really see. So I got kind of close to see the altar, and I was like, I took a picture. Well, I wanted to take a picture, so I said, "Can I take please let me take a picture?" And he said, "Sure, go ahead." And I took the picture, but it came out blank. And this was back when digital cameras, back, I'm dating myself again. But digital camera, you could look at it right away. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? And so it was blank. So I said, I knew I need to ask her. I was like, please, can I see your altar? So I took a picture and the image came up and I could see it and then it went away. I was like,
Wow.
and there's a lesson for anybody doing any spells is you got to be very specific. I said
Yes, yes.
she let me see it, but I couldn't keep the
You couldn't
picture
keep
of it.
it.
But I saw it. I
Yeah.
pretty much saw everything. I mean, he had all the offering. He had, like, I had brought just something, what do you call it? A sweet potato vine, because it was purple, and I just gave it to him. I said, do whatever you want. We were visiting his house. I had never been to his home. So, but she let me see it, and then I couldn't keep it. And I was like, okay, I gotcha.
She's so
I
funny
won't
like
ask
that.
again, but she has I mean, she does. She has this amazing. She's a titan, obviously,
Yeah.
and everybody says, well, she led Persephone. She guided Persephone with light when she was taken into Hades and everything, and so she's and she's at the cave door, and so it's I just find it interesting that in a city that is really, really voodoo, really, really steeped in the voodoo culture, that they have these little pockets of true witchcraft, here and there, that
Yeah,
kind
and
of
you can think
stand out.
about, like, how she helped Demeter find Persephone right there,
Hmm.
it's like mother and child, right? She's always
Right.
mother and child. And I love Holt Cemetery. I did a photo shoot in there way before I lived here, and actually there's an image of it at the Smithsonian of me in the cemetery.
Really? Wow.
Um, and yeah, the stump's gone. I'm part of, like, I'm not part of Save Your Cemeteries, but I attend a lot of their workshops and classes. Like, I did
Hmm.
the cemetery conference was amazing, and actually the main grave digger of New Orleans was there and did a talk.
Hmm.
It's really just an
Oh, they
interesting
do,
job
they
that he
do
has.
great work, but sometimes in these old burying ground, especially there, it's like, wow,
Yeah.
it has so much character, but things had to be done. I mean, the last few times that we had been there, talking to Dean too, it was just sunken graves and walking on stuff. I got stuck in a
Yeah.
ditch. One time
Oh my gosh.
I took somebody who was visiting from San Francisco, as a matter of fact. I think that's who it was, or somebody, I can't remember, of somebody that wanted to film something, and I jumped one of the little ditches and I got stuck And I was
Oh,
I was waving my arms because I was going to fall back on my butt into this wet ditch, but I managed to get out of it.
mhm.
And I kept looking at the mud on my shoes, and I'm walking around, and I was like, I am not bringing these shoes in my car.
Right.
I'm not, and
Cemetery
I'm
mud.
not right. I was like, nope. I took them. I took my shoes off and I left them at the gate. And I called my friend at the time who is a voodoo priestess, and I was like, "What is the amount? What's the money I need to leave at this gate?" And she said 15 cents and any kind of dimes, pennies, whatever you got.
Yeah.
I left 15 cents on right by that door and my shoes. And I went to the Dollar Tree and bought a pair of flip flops. I'm like, I'm not taking. And that was that was back in the day when it was like really steeped in magic, and I kept telling him, and I've told everybody I've brought in there, don't take anything from this cemetery.
No.
Okay.
No.
No, unless you walk and it's right in your path and you see it and it wasn't there or something, or you see it right there, then I would say, yeah, maybe that. And this guy did find like like a ace of spades, a heart. I think it was one, and it was laying there. And I said, yeah, I kind of think, and whatever. He told me something about it later. I can't remember the whole story. But we took some other people in there, and you know how it used to be when it's bury your own in there. And so any
Yeah.
pile of mud that you can pick through, or you can just look at and see bones and stuff like that. Well, we turned our back. Dean was with me, and we turned our back for a little bit, and then we saw, yeah, they're poking around up in the
Oh,
mud. And I know they took stuff, and I just said, don't do it. But they
the
did.
photos I took in there, there was a few times there were certain like spots that her camera, and she had like an expensive camera. She's a well-known photographer in town, but
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't take a picture. She's like, you got to move. Like there's something like my camera won't take a picture and it would be
Mm-hmm.
blurry.
Mm-hmm.
I had a funny experience too in like 2010 or 11. I had brought a friend from Seattle with me and we went to Lafayette Cemetery. Here's a good story. And one of the tombs, the front was broken off and it was hollow inside. And she's like, I want to get in it and I want you to take a
No.
photo of me. So she did it. I was like, all right, I'm not going in, you go in. So she goes
Uh,
in and she does this funny photo. She's this like well-known drag queen. She's in drag. And that night we had an event that we were doing at the Always Lounge. She lost her voice completely, which had never happened to her before. She couldn't even talk.
oh,
And
wow.
she swore, she was like, I know it's because I crawled into that tomb. I shouldn't have. I was like, I told you.
Well, I mean, just on the main of huge spiders, cockroaches, and
All of
mold.
it. Oh,
Yeah,
all
I
of
mean,
it.
that alone should
Oh,
be a deterrent, of
yeah,
not, but, and fear of small places, because you ain't going
right.
to get me in a space like that. No, but
No, and then half it
yeah.
collapses. Like that's why we're not
Yeah,
allowed
I
in
mean,
cemeteries
you
anymore.
kick the wall; those things are old. Like if you kick the
Yeah,
wall or something, it could collapse on you. Really,
yeah,
and underneath them, they have receiving vaults. Some of the old ones where they would push the bones to. Most of the standing tombs, they don't. They just put them into receptacles until the tomb fills up. But some of them still do have those
yeah,
old receiving vaults where they push all the remains that go and it piles up underneath the tomb. So that could
yeah.
collapse and you can find yourself laying on,
Fun.
100 years of bones,
Yeah,
disturbing the dead. And that's, but so, getting back on track a little bit.
yeah.
So now that, I see that you're doing, classes at the Healing Center and you do seance experiences. And I want you to tell us a little bit about that and a little bit more about your art and some of the other things you sent a couple of pictures. I think one was of one of your dolls and
Uh-huh.
another one you were in costume. So you can tell us a little about that. It kind of looked like, where were you in Rosalie Alley? Was because it looked like the fence. I don't know if it was something to do with the Healing Center or something, but I know the old temple that Sally Ann Glassman had, it looked like you were there. But so tell us
No.
a little bit about what you're doing. Okay.
Yeah, so I've been friends with Sally probably about 15 years, and so I would do things at the healing center through my art and stuff when I'd visit, or I would teach a workshop or a class.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last few years, I'm on the board at the healing center.
Okay.
So they wanted me to start putting on events or being more participatory because I was bringing things in just out of like, hey, we should do this here. Let's do it at Healing Center. And they were loving that. So they invited me to be on the board and I got voted in. And so I teach classes there on Sundays from 3 to 6 p.m. And the classes are revolved around the book I just wrote,
Oh,
which is Taking Your Third Eye to the Metaphysical Gymnasium. And it's this
that's a
three-part.
mouthful.
Yeah, it is, right?
Hmm.
So it's a chapbook, which is like a chapbook grimoire,
Hmm.
which is a lot of the work I do as a medium with spiritual hygiene, routine as ritual, and strengthening your senses. Even if this isn't like services you want to offer and you work in an office or a supermarket, why not have your senses be on top of your senses and trust your intuition, right?
Right.
So I teach classes, and each month is usually a different focus. Like July was like, let's dive into shadow work. Everyone talks about shadow work, but what does that mean? And what is shadow work? And how can I like take my shadow off off the steering wheel into the passenger seat so that I have control of what's going on going forward, and to
Hmm.
help you be present and navigate through those things that are maybe blocking you or sabotaging you, or and those are from usually past experiences that are either inherited, because up to 6 generations is in our DNA. So I call it our vehicle, is our body is our vehicle, and then we have our spirit and soul, right? So we want to be in control of that. We don't want anything else to be in control of it, be it our past traumas, inherited traumas, things that we've experienced. We don't want to block us from the best possible outcome. So I did a whole workshop, month's worth of that.
Hmm.
And then, I did a whole month of altars. And so what are altars? What are different altars? What is altar work, And so every Sunday we would dive into a different type of altar. And what does that altar work look like? And is altar work for you? I firmly believe that a big part of my strength is my altar work.
Hmm.
Feeding the spirits, acknowledging the spirits, thanking them for helping me with this work. I think of like our spirits as like, somebody's giving you a ride to work and you never offer to buy lunch or a coffee or pay for gas. That's,
Right.
you're going to
Hmm.
get a little like. So like I see the altar as like giving thanks to the whatever the altar is for, if it's your ancestors, if it's a deity, if it's a um, manifesting altar, whatever the altar is for. Um, and then for October, I had we had a really big focus on Celtic traditions around Day of the Dead.
Hmm.
And so I usually build an altar installation at the Healing Center for the big Day of the Dead. Um, Last year it was all about the grandmother spiders. So it was like embracing the great grandmothers and the spider folklore around that. And
Hmm.
this year was, as I said, the Celtic traditions around Day of the Dead. So it was a really fun month of diving into like a lot of things that most people aren't realizing are a Celtic tradition.
Right.
Um, and we created an entire room that you could experience on November 1st at the Healing Center.
Hmm.
So my class, we kind of did what I call altar crafting. And so you're crafting for the altar, you're building these tools, these pieces, this honorary installation for the dead. And so everyone in the class had some type of Celtic ancestry or heritage. So that's why we picked that.
Hmm.
And it's always been something very important to me to like, for folks to like embrace the folklore of their heritage, or the magical traditions of their heritage. If you go back enough generations, especially out of America, the beautiful traditions around different holidays and seasons,
Hmm.
that's the ancestor work, because the ancestors, if you go back far enough, that's what they were doing too.
Hmm.
So that was a really fun experience. And then, I would take the class on a field trip afterwards. Like one week we went to the Cultural Museum in the Quarter, where it tells the history of the Irish and them coming to New Orleans, and things like that. We went to the Labyrinth in the city park after class one day, and like I had each person walk the labyrinth, because those are created for like thinking and meditating and honoring spirit, right? And
Hmm.
so we do things like that in my
Right. And
classes.
classes. Yeah, we were talking when we were talking earlier, I think before we went on, we were talking about you're also getting ready for Yule celebrations, and you had mentioned particularly Frau Perchta, the
Yes.
Epiphany Witch. So,
Yeah.
is that something you're going to be working on as we get into the Yule season?
Yes, and I also offer like community rituals. So normally around, I work with the Wheel of the Year. So
Mm-hmm.
right now, Samhain began on October 31st, but we're still in the season up to Yule till December 20th.
Right.
So with a lot of that work going in between, we always remember there's 6 weeks. It's not only just one day. Of course, there's the first day of the season, the first
Mm-hmm.
14 hours. But yeah, so now I'm preparing for Yule, and this will be the fifth year since I've lived here, that I do Frau Perchta, and she's part of like a Germanic folklore of this witch, basically for Epiphany, that visits you on Epiphany morning, and she sees if you've spun all your flax, you've done all your chores, you've got your to-do list done, right? And if you do have it all done, she leaves you a gift. But if
Mm-hmm.
you don't have all that done and you're just kind of scattered, you're not getting anything done, she guts you and stuffs you with straw and pebbles.
Oh,
So
yay.
me and my yeah, so normally I hold a Yule public ceremony normally at the Mudlark Public Theater. That's basically my home away from home. It's where I put on a lot of offerings for the community in spiritual factors and spiritual ways. It's where I'll share like Hekatean messages. I've had like a Hekate prayer hut built in there
Okay,
where the community
where
at
is
the
this again?
it's the Mudlark Public Theater, and it's on Murray, off of St. Claude. It's
Okay.
about a block away from the Healing Center. That's my home away from home. That's been my second home as long as I can remember of coming here. So
Mm-hmm.
it's owned by one of my closest friends, which is I'm also involved with the puppet community. So we put on a puppet festival every year, and I'm a coordinator of that. But that's a whole other story. So so yeah, I normally will put on some type of Yule gathering. I'll do like sometimes a midnight supper, which is it's a ritual, but it will be at midnight, and I set up all these tables. And there's usually kind of like what I call a sermon is what I'm doing. I'm usually giving messages that I've received from like spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and normally like it's a positive talk or it's a positive message or something to think about. The Samhain sermon that I did, I handed out scrolls to everybody. There was about 50 people there, that said holy vessel.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's to remind all of us that we are a holy vessel. Each of us is a holy vessel. And what is your lore was the big question. What is your lore?
Mm.
And thinking about what is your lore, like what are your legacies, what are things that you will leave behind when you're gone, because a lot of times the dead tell me to share with the living. They need to they need to start living, they need to
Mm-hmm.
start fully living, because so many people focus on what's wrong or to complain or things like that. So a lot of times the sermons will be around things like that, like planting seeds to like get out of those ways of thinking and thinking more of growing and being curious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the photo shoot you're telling me about was I was asked to model for a collective here. Um,
Yeah, I was looking at it, and it kind of looks like, well, it looks like you're standing next to someone carrying a horse head. So
oh no, no,
it
that's
sort of looks like a
Val
mummer's thing.
Perchta. No, that's Val Perchta,
Oh,
and
that's
so
the Frau Perchta. Okay.
and Mary Lewid. So Mary Lewid is a Welsh folklore, and it's a horse head skull. And
Mm-hmm.
what they do is during Yule season, the Mary Lewid, they come knock on your door, and it's kind of like a call and response. And so when you finally open your door, you sing back and forth these rhymes,
Right.
and then the household invites in the Mary Lewid, and ahead of the Mary Lewid, a witch comes and sweeps out your kitchen for the new year. Um,
Yeah.
and then you give a drink to the Mary Lewid. So my husband dresses up as the Mary Lewid, and I'm the Frau Perchta. And what we do is, so I do this whole Yule ritual ceremony gathering for community at Mudlark every year.
Mm-hmm.
And then from Yule until Epiphany, I make 13 gifts for people that I've been close with throughout the year. Some years I have some of the same people that have, every year they get a gift. And then sometimes it's new people that have come into my life that have been prominent or supportive or shown up in a way that's very blessed, you know?
Mhm.
And so what we do is on Epiphany morning, that picture I sent you is how we are dressed and we do deliveries. And so I get a king cake. I go to Bywater Bakery, get a king cake, and we deliver a piece of king cake and handmade gifts to 13 of our friends for the year.
Well, that's cool. That's
And then I
definitely cool.
and then I go to Joan of Arc, and I'm in crew of Krampus, so she's also relatable to Krampus lineage of like it's all that, you know, like Germanic
Right. Well,
Alps.
the horse head was at one time real. That's what people,
Yes,
forget, that it really was a horse's head that they walked around with, and
exactly.
every,
Exactly. And they still do. They still do in
yeah.
some. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just like the robin in the box. I think it's pleased to see the king or whatever, and the dead robin in the box, and you go around to the house and they ask to see it, and you show it to them, and then you get gifts and stuff like that. That's another
Yeah.
one, and yeah, so that
So I do
everybody,
stuff like that. Like, so some
yeah.
people will be freaked out about it, but like literally my community's like they're eager. They look forward to Frau Perchta coming now because I do things like that are
Hmm.
incorporated.
Well, I
And
guess
a lot of
so.
times
I
at
mean, yes.
Yule, and like a lot of times at Yule or at Imbolc or Ostara or Beltane, I pass out like pieces of whatever it may be for you to hold on to through the season and then throw it in the river, throw it in a fire, like little talisman for the season. So it's a collective of all of that going on. And I really love Mabon season to Beltane. My birthday's on Beltane.
Hmm.
So like that's my active time. And then the summer I'm down. I'm like, okay, I'm creating a new collection. I'm seeing what's going on, what I'm creating for the next year, you know? So
Hmm.
I'm very active from Mabon until Beltane. And
Yeah.
um
Well, I tell people all the time. A lot of people, they go by the seasons, and it's meteorological seasons. When you hear, the guy on TV saying it starts on the 20th or whatever of September, let's say fall starts. No,
yeah,
it
maybe
really doesn't. It started on the 1st of August. And
right.
it's perfect. So we're in winter right now, from the first
Yeah.
November until February 1st. We're in so it's November, December, and January. And I always I said old style, and I kind of follow that in my mind. Really, I do. And so it can be 91 degrees, but I'll be putting fall stuff up for,
Right.
because it's here. So people, it's
So
a
the
much
wheel of
better
the year.
way. Yeah, and it's a
So
much
the wheel
better
of the
way to
year.
relate to the year, to relate to the seasons, and celebrate them each, And like, I'm a November child. It could be, when you say gloomy and dark and all, and I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Send me to England. That would be fun. Not right now, but
How you live in
sweet
it. Like
dreams.
that's how
Yeah.
I thought I was because I was a California girl and I've always been like a death rocker, goth rocker, and all that. Um, I thought living in that was what I wanted, but when you have 9 months of no sunshine, it
I
affects you, extremely affects you.
I don't know.
Um,
I'm older than you, but and I'm like, I'm done yeah. I could live gray every day. I really could.
well,
Dark shadows
it's
every
funny
day.
because no matter where I've lived, the summer is always my downtime because people will be like, "Well, it's hot, that's why you're doing that here." And I'm like, "No, I did that in Seattle. I did that in California." So Lughnasadh Lammas is August 1st, and that's when the funeral games begin, and that's when a lot of deaths
Right.
happen.
Hmm.
And that's
Yeah.
when I've experienced like before I was 40, my entire family was dead except for my children.
Hmm.
Both my parents, everything. And so August is my time that I actually will take a few weeks off of work and
Hmm.
like go to the woods or like I'll go to like a witch conference or a medicinal conference of some sorts, or I will take that time off because it's a really hard time of the season for me. And so once Mabon hits, which is September 20th, I feel like I've honored that. And that took many years of realizing, oh, that's why summer is not a big deal to me because, like, this is a hard time of the season. And when we can acknowledge that and realize that, then we can acquire the metaphysical tools to get us through that, right? So we don't go into a spiral of doom or a depression.
Hmm.
So, um, Yeah, so Lammas or Lunisad, August 1st, I'm like, I'm off. I'm done. And
Yeah.
I do my last fire on Litha for summer, and
Mhm.
then I go in and I create collections. I work on whatever I'm going to be sharing in community from
Right.
Mabon to Beltane, and I get it all prepared so that when it's like ready, steady, go, most of it's prepared or ready.
Mhm.
Right now I'm working on puppets for the Pharmacy Museum, and I'll be there in December 15th.
Oh, you'll
In the
be
French
having
Quarter.
a show there?
Hey.
Wait.
I'll be vending there on December 15th.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
why don't this would be a good time. We're almost wrapping up. This would be a good time to if anyone wants to get in touch with you, wants to find out more about your services and the things that you can do. Where would they do that?
They could find me on my website. It's Kook Teflon, KOOKTEFLON.com. And that has
Oh.
absolutely everything that I offer services wise. You can hire me for seances, for herbal oracle readings, for events, for, a lot of people have a dinner party or a birthday and they'll have me come do readings, or I'll
Mhm.
come talk to a group about spirit, about anything that they're wanting me to talk about, and I'll have a little focus on it.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes it's like a tarot reading for 10 people that are here for a birthday or for a gathering or for a celebration. Um, and I also do group medium sessions. So like I'll do up to 12 family members, and I've gone pretty far out. I've gone out to Pearl River. I've gone to Baton Rouge. I've been flown out also for work as far as like St. Augustine, Florida. I did some civil rights. I worked on a civil rights case as a medium there.
Mhm.
And so I'm also travel. I will travel. Um, and as
That's
I said
scary.
earlier, yeah, and as earlier I was mentioning, I've been spending a lot of time in Hudson Valley, which was
Right.
the original burned over district. I'm getting certified right now through the NSAC, which is the NSAC, National Spiritualist Association, so that
Mhm.
it's a really cool program. You're basically learning the foundations and the history of spiritualism. But
Right.
what this will certify me to be a minister through the spiritualist churches, and do healings and do readings. And so Lilydale, Casadega, there's 11 of them that are active continuously in the country.
Mhm.
Once you get certified, you can work or live there, and they're tiny communities that everybody that lives in the community is a certified psychic medium.
Mm. Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, how you had gone to Hudson
Lilydale,
Valley.
yeah, Lilydale was it's been around since like the 1882 was built.
Mhm.
Um and yeah, the burned over district is really amazing. It's like suffragette, like it was the first place that women were able to go and talk publicly. Like Susan B. Anthony and all these people were very heavily involved at Lilydale. Um Thomas Edison spent a lot of time there. The Ackroyd family spends a lot of time there.
Mhm.
Um all of that. So as a spiritualist, I'm very proud to be a spiritualist. I really love the history and I love the community. Very loving, very kind. Um,
Well,
it's about the dead.
spiritualist, um, define that. I mean, just really quickly, because some people get it all mixed up. Some people like, it's spirit communication or you're conjuring, or so, it's a loosely applied word. So really, what is the right definition for that?
Yeah, so spiritualism, the Fox sisters are what started it.
Mm-hmm.
And spiritualism is communicating with the dead, and that can be through seance, through readings. I mean, there's also spoon bending, there's,
Table
you know,
tipping. Do they still do that?
oh yeah, they do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's next life. It's not afterlife. You're not dead. It's just next life.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
Summerland is like is a phrase that Andrew Jackson Davis wrote about and is still honored. There's even in Santa Barbara, there's a spiritualist community there. And so Yeah, spiritualism is communicating with the dead and with spirit. They don't even say dead, like, they don't like to say dead, they say spirit. They say next life, we say next life, and it's consistently studying the next life too.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Mhm.
just wanted to share that, my Sunday classes are December 1st and 8th at the Healing Center on Sundays
Okay.
from 3 p.m. they start. And this two-part series is As We Enter Darkness. So it's going to be like altar crafting, candle magic, witch cords, bells and jars, mantra for the darkest of nights. So
And those will
activity,
be at the Healing Center in
yes.
New Orleans, right? So will they have it too on their calendar on their site?
They will have it on their calendar and it's on my website, and um it's in the library at the Healing Center, which is on basically the second floor. There's elevators, so it's wheelchair accessible,
Mhm.
and there's bathrooms and all that fun stuff. So it's like
Yeah.
it's a comfortable little nook of a library that I get to do my classes in.
Mhm.
Um, and there'll be more information about that. You can also find me on my Instagram, which is under Mugga Rose,
Spell that.
Mugga Rose, and that's my two great grandmothers' names put together, Mugga
Ah,
Rose.
okay. I was going to ask you.
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, we'll
I
make.
was Coop Teflon for 13 years, and then she retired. It's like my creative persona,
Mhm.
and Mugga Rose came in, and she's gonna take me through my 50s.
Take you through the rest.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well, it's been great having you, and I want to invite you back in the new year sometime when your schedule
Mhm.
permits to talk about those experiences you had in the house, to actually get into some hauntings in
Yeah.
the house in San Francisco, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about the strange things that happen near railroad tracks.
Railroad tracks, and I have some incredible stories that happened in the Butterworth mortuary
Oh
that were,
yeah,
like, literally
Oh, wow.
spine-tingling, like, experiences
yeah. Well, we
where
would
I
love
had
to have you
numerous.
back to talk about that definitely. So
I would
we'll
be
look
happy
forward to.
to.
We'd like to thank our amazing guest, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you have, please give us a like and a share, and please consider subscribing to our channel. We'll be back soon with another great guest. And as always, thanks for listening, and good night.